Hey everyone, welcome to the weekend recap. I'm Adrian and this is your co-host, Plant. And this weekend recap is sponsored by me, and maybe yourself as well. Now you may have noticed that I've added an option to donate to the NAACP's Legal Defense and Educational Fund in light of the recent events surrounding George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and the endless drip of police brutality videos that we are seeing from protests around the world. I'm typically apolitical on this channel, but like I said last week, this isn't strictly a politics issue or topic, but both political and human rights. Racism is rife throughout our global society. It touches every aspect, including football, which I have never been afraid to call out with events in the past in Germany, Italy, England, everywhere this past season, really. There is systemic racism and discrimination all over the world, here in Canada, across the United States, as you can quite clearly see by taking any trip onto Twitter or the world news, in England, amongst the caste systems within India, Australia, you name it. But right now, the global focus is on the Black community and in standing up for them and in being an ally to them. That's not to say that other minorities or other lives are held in lesser value. That's why the all lives matter sentiment pisses me off. In saying Black Lives Matter, you aren't saying Black lives are superior to others. It's asking for equality for the Black community, not superiority over others. It's asking to be treated the same, not to get special treatment. And besides, you can't say that all lives matter until Black Lives Matter as much as all of the others. And so while I personally have a small voice on this platform, I still feel like I can do something to help, something to contribute. Racism exists because we've chosen to be passive. We've chosen to not speak up enough against racist practices worldwide, and that's including in football, by the way, where in Italy, for example, the racist filth you hear coming from the stands just gets a slap on the wrist as opposed to a legitimate punishment. It will never stop if it's not punished appropriately, and wearing a patch that says "Say no to racism" won't sway any racists from continuing to do what they do. It's not going to stop anybody. So anyways, with that said, I decided to start a fundraiser on the channel for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP's Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Anything you can give is absolutely appreciated. No donation is too big or small, and if you can't give, there will never be any sort of donation shaming here. I kicked things off on Friday, and without even mentioning that I've started the fundraiser, you guys have nearly doubled my initial donation. So thank you so much to those that have donated already. All the revenue that I make on the weekend recap in the month of June will go straight into the fundraiser as well, and I'm hoping I'll be forced into increasing the goal of $1,000, US dollars that is, so let's hope that's what happens. And just so you know, every cent you give, that money goes straight into the NAACP and helps fund policy change with regard to the civil rights of Black people, not just in the USA, but in Canada, Brazil, South Africa, worldwide, really. It helps fund litigation, advocacy, education outreach, policy research, voting rights, employment discrimination, and much, much more. So I thank you in advance if you are donating, but if not, I've added a link to how else you can help make a change and be an ally in this fight. With that said, guys, let's talk some football now. Let's get back to the weekend recap starting in... It's been extremely interesting to see how, for the most part, the form that teams were in before the enforced COVID break has carried over to the return. And in Portugal, that's been the story as well at least in the case of Benfica and Porto. This season's title race between Porto and Benfica, well, tight, has basically been about who can be a little less shit than the other. Porto marked their return with a tricky match away to Famalicão, and this one will have had Sergio Conceição hitting that speed dial to speak with his anger management psychologist. 2-1 loss, meaning that if Benfica could win at home against 14th place Tondela, they would reclaim first place. But what does Benfica do this weekend? The same thing they have been doing since February, where it all started to go to crap. The defense continues to be fairly solid, which, to be honest with you, I think I speak for many Benfiquistas when I was alarmed and nervous about seeing Jardel in the starting 11. But as for the attack, it's blunt, dull. There is no plan, and it's easy to see that. Our top player, at least stats-wise, has been an inconsistent Pizzi. That says everything about our attack. There's no creativity, and there was nobody making plays. Sure, we were unlucky in that we hit the woodwork twice, but beyond that, we were poor, besides maybe the opening few minutes where the team looked up for it and Rafa came close, but Lage continues his streak of looking tactically inept. Maybe he can turn it around, and I hope he does, because I love the guy. But when we need a goal, his tactical range only takes him as far as taking off one of his 2 holding midfielders for a striker, and we play with 2 up top as opposed to 1. Diego Souza and Seferovic partnering each other, I mean, come on, man. You made your bread last season by playing a dynamic attacker in João Felix alongside a more classic striker in Haris Seferovic. We looked better with Rafa as that creative attacker, as a second striker, sort of filling that João Felix role, but that was short-lived. Diego Souza and Seferovic up top, there's no world where I see that as a good idea, especially when you have Servi and Jota sitting on the bench. So, Benfica failed to take advantage, and the bad form for the other top teams in the league continued as well. Sporting, later in that same day, Thursday, were held to a 2-2 draw with Vitória Guimarães, but for me, that's a much more understandable result than drawing 0-0 at home against 14th place Tondela. Nice scarves in the stands, though. That was a nice touch. Braga had a tough return as well, as they played on the island of my people, São Miguel, and ended up losing 3-2 thanks to a 93rd minute winner from Santa Clara's Carlos. Raul Silva will really be ruining his clumsy game, in which he got 2 yellows in 18 minutes of action. As I said on Twitter, this Liga season feels like an experiment in seeing who can be as crappy as possible, but just good enough to win a league trophy. Porto and Benfica are playing a little bit of after you, and considering Benfica has just 1 victory in their last 6 matches, it's amazing that they are currently the leaders in Portugal, at least on goal difference. 14 points behind Porto, Braga. Sporting is 4th, while Rio Ave, Vitória Guimarães and Famalicão are all circling around Sporting. We're back in Germany. Germany had to share the spotlight with Portugal for this edition of the Weekend Recap, but Bayern Munich continued to hog the spotlight in the Bundesliga in a match that many were calling a potential tripping hazard on their way to their 8th consecutive Bundesliga title. Bayern dealt with Leverkusen quite handily for most of this match. It was bookended by some great moments for Leverkusen, but showing up for the opening and closing of the match just isn't enough, especially when you're playing against Bayern Munich. Lucas Alario put the host Leverkusen ahead in the 9th minute, but before half an hour had been spent, Kingsley Coman equalized, and according to Opta-France, that goal was the 62nd goal that Bayern have scored since Hansi Flick took over in what was his 20th Bundesliga match in charge of Bayern. And yes, that's a goal-scoring record for any manager in Bundesliga history following their first 20 matches, and there were more on the way. After setting up, Coman Goretzka was set up by none other than Thomas Muller, and what's a Bayern match without a Muller assist and a Lewandowski goal, right? Muller went ahead and set up Lewandowski later for Bayern's 4th, but before that, Gnabry scored his 12th of the season. 4-1 Bayern at that point. So, a couple of things here. This is Robert Lewandowski's best ever season goal-scoring wise, with 44 in just 38 games across all competitions. His previous best was 43 goals in the 2016-17 season, and Muller, with his assist tally reaching 20, he breaks the Bundesliga record, which was previously set by Kevin De Bruyne in the 2014-15 season when he had 19 assists. Crazy considering he wasn't even in favor under Niko Kovac at the beginning of the season. And on the topic of records, Florian Wirtz, another young talent from Bayer Leverkusen, became the youngest scorer in Bundesliga history when he scored in the 89th minute to make it 4-2. He turned 17 just 34 days prior to scoring on May 3rd. Big up Wirtz. Borussia Dortmund ensured that the title race was still semi-interesting with 4 matches remaining as they just squeaked past an extremely in-form Hertha Berlin, handing their new manager Bruno Labbadia his first loss in charge of the capital city club. Again though, Dortmund were slow starters, just as they have been in many a match this season. Not every match, obviously. They really are a second half team though in my eyes, and it took a second half push for them to truly trouble Rune Jarstein in the Hertha goal. Now, what I liked about this Hertha performance, despite them losing, of course, and maybe it did hurt them, was the fact that they were not going to sit back on Dortmund and they were pushing to score a goal. However, like I alluded to, I guess you could also argue that in doing so, they fell right into Dortmund's trap, as Dortmund love to draw teams onto themselves and then spring their attack quickly, which they had more room to do in the second half as Hertha were searching for the breakthrough and their wings pushed up. Their fullbacks got forward. But it was actually an Emre Can goal, Can who was playing as a center back for Dortmund, that broke the deadlock in the 57th minute. A well-taken goal, and you can say a well-deserved victory for Dortmund based on that second half performance, but it's nice to see Hertha playing well under Labadia, you know? That loss may hurt their chances at the Europa League, but you never know. RB Leipzig continued to collect draws as they were held at home against the basement boys, Paderborn. 1-1 the score there, as Nagelsmann is having some issues getting matches over the line for RB Leipzig. Having issues breaking those dead rubbers, and with talks of Timo Werner agreeing to join Chelsea for next season, it will prove to be even more difficult if Werner is to leave. Mind you, on this occasion, it must be said that Paderborn, who played extremely well, scored the equalizer in the 91st minute, so had that not happened, we would be singing a different tune of Nagelsmann and the boys. A game of margins, hey? Marco Rose and Mönchengladbach took another setback as they have had a very mixed bag of results since the return of football in Germany. This time, they played away to Freiburg, another team that you could say has suffered the same fate since the return. A very mixed bag, but on this occasion, it was the host Freiburg who got the W. 1-0 thanks to a Nils Petersen goal in the 58th minute. 10 minutes later, Alassane Plea was sent off for his second yellow of the match, et voila! Mönchengladbach's form is starting to match that of my Mönchengladbach in my career mode. Oh man, I'm sorry, I can't help but feel like this is all my fault. Apologies to Marco Rose. Augsburg's Philipp Max had only scored 7 goals in the Bundesliga prior to this season, where he has now scored 8 following his late equalizer against Köln. Like I said, Köln matches are almost always fun to watch. 3 minutes prior to the equalizer, Anthony Modeste had scored what I assumed would be an 85th minute winner for Köln, but they haven't won a single match since the return, and it shows. For all of their excitement going forward, their back line has been quite shoddy. 1-1 the final there. There's always a late show with Köln though. You gotta watch till the end with those guys. And finally, it's looking like Werder Bremen's plans for a great escape are getting further and further out of reach following their 1-0 loss to Wolfsburg this weekend. With that in mind though, the bottom half of the table shows that they are 6 points from guaranteed safety, but could still nick the relegation playoff spot from Mainz with 4 matches remaining. At the top, the title race is still technically active as Bayern have some tricky matches remaining, but it would take what feels like a colossal mistake from Bayern to let this lead slip. The fight for the final Champions League spot, however, is going to be very entertaining in the matches to come. All to fight for there still, with a few teams in reach of it. Alright guys, the next weekend recap will also see La Liga join the party, as they are coming back on June 11th with the Seville derby, so I can't wait to watch that. Thanks as always for watching, you guys. I love you, and please stay safe. Ciao.